If your faith crumbles when you remove the idea of free will, then free will is your God. Hey guys, welcome to Joel Reads Bible. I'm Joel, and I'm reading the Bible so that you don't have to. And today is one of our exciting recap episodes where we are recapping the last 10 chapters of Exodus, and I'm really excited about it. We're going to do back-to-back recap episodes. We're going to be doing this one, which is Exodus 30 to 40, and then the next episode is going to be just the recap of all of Exodus. And then ever so soon, we will be in Leviticus, which is going to be incredibly exciting. And we're going to have another color change, which I don't know if you guys like it, but I like switching up the colors a little bit. Keep it fresh and exciting. So we're going to get right into this, but please do consider subscribing today. Hit the subscription button, like this video, and of course, if you wouldn't be so kind to leave me a comment, just say hi. Just say, what's going on? How's it going? Giving you a little bit of engagement. Engagement? I don't know how to pronounce that word. But let's get into our recap, starting, of course, with chapter 31, which not a lot happened. We were introduced to Bezalel and Oholiab, who are going to be our skilled workers, which did raise the question to me about free will and somebody being imbued with certain talents or skills. It just shows that God is claiming, and you don't want to take this away from him, he's claiming to be in complete control over everything. It is all his domain. He's going to do things the way he wants to. He's going to imbue people with the talents he wants to imbue them with. He's in complete control. Nothing is left to chance. There is no free will. And then we get another reiteration of the Sabbath. Now, I don't know how many times in this book, maybe I should count them, that the Sabbath day is going to be mentioned and or reiterated. It happens over and over and over again. Sometimes it's cool and cash. Sometimes it's with the threat of death. In this case, it's just cool and cash, if I remember correctly. But they do go into quite a bit of detail. It's so important to have this Sabbath day. And again, my joke has always been, oh, this guy really wants a day off, whoever's writing the book. And that really must be it, because why else would they be going so hard with this Sabbath stuff? But anyway, then let's get into my favorite chapter possibly of Exodus, maybe even the Bible so far, chapter 32. Watch the episode. So when I initially read this chapter, I thought that the Hebrews were being ridiculous. They were like, we have to wait for 40 days. Moses is gone. Who knows about this God? Let's invent our own God. Let's make a God out of our earrings, and we will worship this God as if it's the God that brought us out of Egypt, which is absolutely bonkers, right? Like, why would they be so forgetful when they saw countless miracles coming out of Egypt? That doesn't make any sense. These characters are horribly motivated. It's just completely illogical for them to do this. But then I spoke to my dear friend Justin at the Deconstruction Zone, and I'll tag him in the description. And he told me that in the culture of the time, people would build idols hoping that the God that they're worshiping would come and be in the idol, kind of like a conduit. So this wasn't them building themselves a God. This was them calling on Yahweh in a sense, who is known, and you can Google this, as a calf god or a bull god. So they were calling Yahweh to come and be in this calf. So really they missed Yahweh. They missed their God. They wanted him there. They wanted his presence. They were getting a little uncomfortable waiting for his presence. So they forced it a little bit. And they did something that went against one of the 10 commandments. Do not make graven images of animals and stuff. So they did break that rule. But the motivation was to be near their God. Either they aren't properly motivated and they're making a God and it doesn't make any sense for them to do that, or they're making a calf so that Yahweh will come and be with them. But either way, the reaction is completely bonkers. I can't understand how this reaction makes any sort of reasonable sense for a God or anyone. Like, I can't imagine reacting that way. Like, love is supposed to be patient, but Yahweh is not patient. He's not slow to anger. This is a very fast, very intense reaction. If I can't even get my head around it, am I more patient, more loving, more kind to Yahweh? To these people? I don't even know them. I don't know if I mentioned this in the video, but Yahweh reacting this way when he knows the outcome. Like, he's outside of space and time. This has happened before the foundations of the earth, right? He knows all of this. For him to react this way in a moment is, again, very illogical, right? He also knows the result. Like, he knows how this is going to play out. So he's reacting even though he knows maybe it's going to be better. It's going to be fine. This isn't a very big deal. He's crying over spilt milk. It seems like it's that insignificant. It's like, you guys, I told you not to do that. But he has the reaction of a child who doesn't realize that spilling the milk isn't that big of a deal, right? He has the same reaction that, I don't know, some ancient illiterate shepherds might have when imagining what a god might do. Or what I really reckon is people trying to stir up drama in some creative writing, but maybe not doing the best job of it. You know what I mean? But it is fascinating to me if the Hebrews in this chapter are rejecting Yahweh, they're getting a new god. It's because of impatience, right? They're sick of waiting. But keep in mind that Yahweh's been a barbarian a lot of the time. Fine. We're not going to reject that behavior. He's been a fearmonger. He's had them trembling at the base of a mountain. Fine. We're not going to push back on that. No, why would we do that? You should have slaves. You should unalive people who curse their parents. Here's some misogynistic laws to subjugate women. Fine. We're not going to push back. This is all okay. But waiting, we have to wait for where's Moses? You know what? Let's get a new God. That's why we're going to get the new God. Everything else was perfectly fine up until the point where we had to wait around a little bit. You're reacting to the wrong things, okay? These are all just really great indicators that this story is a complete fiction. And I hope you're beginning to see that. So Moses has to appeal to God's ego. You don't want to look like an idiot, God. You don't want to look like a moron. Everyone's going to be watching. They actually say this a couple times in the chapter, like there's people watching them. They're going to be like, oh, these guys, they're not worshiping correctly. Oh, that God took them out of Egypt just to unalive them? That's embarrassing. You guys are at the base of a mountain, either Sinai or Horeb, waiting to get on with your lives. Who's watching this? Where is the audience? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's so silly. Imagine you worship a God that's like, oh, I don't want to look silly. I want people to think that I'm good to you and that I'm not so goofy that I would take you out of Egypt. Seems like a very human concern there, writers. You didn't think that one through. In verse 25, it does say that Moses saw that the people were running wild and Aaron had let them get out of control and so became a laughingstock to their enemies. That is some sort of a propaganda type thing. It's this setting apart thing. It's this behave this way or your enemies will laugh at you as if they're going to care. So you must behave a certain way so that doesn't happen. It's a weird sort of peer pressure. You know what I mean? It's like they're going to laugh at you. So, we're going to behave correctly. We're going to live upright lives and follow the laws of our God, lest we be embarrassed. You know, it's like, does anybody care? They either want to kill you or they don't. Like, I don't know who's sitting there going like, I used to like them, but they don't seem to follow their God's laws. Like, what are you talking about? They seem to be making another idol. I don't really think we can be friends with them. Like, they're apparently sacrificing children over there. Is that why you're sacrificing children too, just to look cool for them? Is that what's going on here? I'm not sure if Aaron is going to be punished for doing what he did, where he was just like, okay, yep, we're going to build this idol. And then I'm going to say, this is your gods that brought you out of Egypt. I'm not sure if he ever gets punished for that, but hopefully, because he really did facilitate what happened here. And when we get the punishment moment, Aaron, I don't know if he hides or he just steps back a little bit and doesn't want to, be involved. Seems like he gets away with it a little bit in that moment. And of course, the punishment is God being such a villain again. Why is God such a villain that he is actually going to command these Levites go and kill their brothers, their friends, and their neighbors, those closest to them? You, the person that you love, you have to go and slice that person's throat with that sword. I want you to see life leave their eyes. I want that for you. I am Yahweh. I am God. That is so barbaric. It's so wildly horrible, yet it's consistent. Like Deuteronomy 13, he wants families to stone each other. And then we get Jesus, who's like, I haven't come to bring peace but a sword. I want to pit family members against each other. Your enemies will be in your household. Over me, I want to split families up. I want to cause division. I am God. And this is, I think, the first time that we see that violently enacted. But I have a feeling that it's not going to be, well, I know the Deuteronomy one, but I think there's probably going to be even more. But the story is ridiculous. The story is ridiculous because God changes his mind. God gets super, super angry in a moment, even though he's all-knowing and timeless. And those are things that shouldn't be happening with this God if you believe that he's an immutable triomni God. It doesn't make sense. It's really hard to rationalize this. But if you just drop the pretense of, and I should say the presuppositions, and you just look at this as a folk tale, as some lore for a particular culture trying to big themselves up, it seems to make a lot more sense. You actually can learn, oh, that's interesting. In that time, they were using idols as a conduit to bring gods down there. Okay, that's interesting. So that's why they would write a story like this, because that would make sense to them in the time. Okay, the God character that isn't real got super, super angry. Oh, that's fascinating. An angry God, I've read that in other pantheons and other fictional works about particular gods. An angry, fallible God. Okay, that makes sense. Oh, the God was convinced not to unalive everyone. Okay, cool. That's reasonable. The God changes its mind. That's fine. That's a fictional God. They're allowed to do that. That's perfectly okay. Ooh, the God sent them to unalive 3,000 of their closest relatives. That's barbaric. Oh my goodness, this is a barbaric God now. This is a short-sighted, very angry, barbaric God that changes his mind a little bit. This is easy to swallow as a fictional story. It's kind of fun, actually. It's a really great chapter. But if you have to believe this and you want to impose your tri-omni, very real, very true God that's the creator of the universe, who loves you personally and also loves these Hebrews, you are going to run into a lot of problems. So then in chapter 33, we are met with God right away in verse 2, kind of reiterating something from chapter 32, which was, I don't know how much more I can handle spending time with you people. I can't hang out with you, which is kind of funny because he's like, well, we all have families, right? I can't spend time with these people. They're going to drive me up the wall, honestly. It's too much. But the reaction to that is that I'm going to destroy them. If I have to spend too much time with these knuckleheads, I'm going to destroy them. Destroy them? Why can't you spend time with these people? Why can't you enjoy your chosen people, by the way? These are your main people. What's your problem? Is it because you're too good and righteous and holy? Is that what it is? That you can't bear to be around these stiff-necked people who are not righteous and not holy? Is your reaction of wanting to destroy them a holy reaction, a righteous reaction? If it is, then why don't we emulate that? Why don't we get super, super angry and frustrated with people and not even be able to be around them? And if we have to be around them, we go ahead and destroy them. Why isn't that fine? Why does that feel so wrong? It's do as I say, not as I do, I assume. Don't follow God's example. He shouldn't have to lead by example. We shouldn't be anything like God. I agree. Like in Genesis, when it's like, they'll become like us, violent and impatient and quick to anger, and then heavily gaslighting you in the next little bit saying, I'm not those things. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. So then for some weird reason, in verse 6, Moses appeals to God's ego again. One of the themes that you get from Christians about the whole Bible, apparently, is pride. And it's obviously our pride, or even Lucifer's pride, that caused him to fall. Pride is like the worst sin. That's like sin number one. And yet God is all ego. He's all narcissism. He's all pride. He's just like, these people are frustrating me. Fine, I'll go with you as long as I don't look like an idiot. I don't want to look like an idiot by abandoning you. I just want to impress. This really does just indicate that maybe the writers of the Bible kind of had one trick up their sleeve, and it was like ego. Ego is the bad thing. So it's ego versus ego. And maybe it's not a bad thing. Maybe it's just a dispassionate sort of telling of ego versus ego. However, I don't think that we see that much ego in the human element of this text. I don't think we get the idea of pride through it. I haven't really noticed that as a theme. That's something that feels like Christians impose on the text rather than it being actually in the text. But God certainly, he's got an ego. He's a jealous God. He really is egotistical. So then we get this little moment where God hangs out with Moses at a tent. They speak face to face. And God is there as a cloud. So I think people would say that he didn't see his face. He saw the face of the cloud. The clouds don't have faces, right? I mean, I have a real hard time with this, where in the same chapter, it says, God spoke face to face with Moses the way you would speak to a friend. So it's very specific that like I would speak to my friend face to face, like we're talking now. And then later in the chapter, it's like, no one can see God's face and live. And so I'm going to show you me, but I'm going to hide myself, etc. This might be what happens in a number of different places in the Bible where they splice together two stories. I understand Noah's Ark is one of those where you get 2 by 2 for all the animals, and then suddenly 7 for some of them, and then 2 for the unclean, whatever. Like the story changes from verse to verse or chapter to chapter, and it might just be, let's combine more than one tradition into this final text. And this might be one of those things. It's like a bunch of people are seeing God's face, and then also you can't see God's face and live. But we're going to put both of them in there, even though they're contradictory. And then when there's a fundamentalist who can't accept that the Bible isn't really a perfect word of God, and it isn't inerrant, and it isn't infallible, they're going to have to do all sorts of gymnastics to mentally, obviously not necessarily physically, to make it make sense. And it never will, right? It just never will. But they'll just get it to a point where it sort of stays together and the house doesn't completely fall apart. Even within this text, we get Sinai and Horeb being interchangeable. The Hebrews are at the base of both Mount Sinai and Mount Horeb. And that's impossible, right? Mount Sinai can't also be Mount Horeb. The reason why this is happening is because two narratives have been spliced together. And so I'm going to assume that being able to see God's face and not being able to see God's face are two narratives spliced together, because I can't make sense of this contradiction personally. And I don't care to hear the apologetics, if I'm perfectly honest. So in chapter 34, Moses is going back up the mountain because he broke all the tablets, and he's got to get new tablets. So he chisels some out of stone, which begs the question, why? Why, Moses? Why you got to chisel? You know, God's got laser fingers. He's doing laser engraving, right? He's writing the thing right into the stone. Can't he start you off? Like, can't he just, do some chiseling with his finger and then, okay, bring it up. And then in verse 5 we read, "Then the Lord came down in the cloud and stood there with him and proclaimed his name, the Lord." Do you think God floats down in a cloud? I guess he could have been coming through the cloud, but he also might be coming down in a cloud. Maybe he is the cloud, but do you believe that God floats around on a cloud? I mean, isn't this a little bit juvenile or a lot juvenile? Like, you're a fully grown adult at this point, and you believe that God floats around like a cloud, you idiot. Like, you really believe that? And I don't want to shame anyone for believing stupid juvenile fairy tales, but really, God's showing up on a cloud? Really? Like, oh, sweetie, grow up. Oh, man. Like, you can grow up. You're allowed to grow up, No one's going to punish you anymore. You're a fully grown adult. Is this supposed to be anthropomorphic again? If it is, it's unimaginative, right? A cloud, really? Like, why is God, the creator of the universe, so unimaginative when it comes to revealing himself? You know what I mean? Like, there are many different ways he does it, sort of thing, hit here and there. One time it was a burning bush. Like, it's not bad, but it still is sort of like locked in time and not all that interesting. So in verse 6 and 7, we get God's lie. He says, "The Lord is compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin." His actions speak louder than words, don't they? Like, he just had 3,000 best friends killed over them trying to have some time with their God. They're like, "God, come spend time with us." "No, dead. You're lying. That's not compassionate. That's not gracious. That's not slow to anger. That's not abounding in love." But then it says maintaining love to thousands. How many thousands? 600,000? There's 2 million people there. What do you mean thousands? That's a very small number. This just shows how juvenile this is. God said this. He maintains love to thousands. And if you think he means billions of people that are on the face of the planet, that he's maintaining love to all these people, but he just said thousands, it's like groups of thousands, come on. It's because the people writing this, we're not good at numbers, guys. Just remember that. This is making the 144,000 part of the Bible make a lot more sense. It's like God is limited. He's like, I can only love thousands. Like 144,000 tops, because honestly, you want me to love millions or billions? How many people have there been on this planet? Billions of people. You want me to love that many? I can maintain love to thousands, but that's about it, And for a lot of them, I have to maintain love for 40,000 years to a lot of them. Because as soon as someone loves me for a generation, I have to love them for 1,000 generations. God's love is not everlasting or abounding or any of these things. He's not abounding. It's actually quite limited. Thousands? That's pathetic. I almost love thousands. I don't know that many people. I probably love tens, but still, I could love thousands. Then we get this verse where Moses says, Although this is a stiff-necked people, forgive our wickedness and our sin, and take us as your inheritance. When you inherit something, how does it work usually? You inherit things from someone. Do you remember that? Like you might get a hand-me-down from an older sibling. A relative might pass away. You might inherit some of their stuff. Have you ever made a craft and then imagined that you inherited it? I'm going to inherit that to me. Well, that's what's sort of going on here, that God is inheriting these people from himself. He's created his own inheritance. How would that possibly work? I don't know. Maybe there's a higher God than Yahweh. Maybe if you go on the internet, and I'm not going to spell it all out here, but maybe if you look up El Elyon and Yahweh, and maybe if you look at the Most High God, and you look into the text to see if maybe Yahweh is inheriting the Hebrews from El Elyon, that might open your mind to this other narrative that is going to be ignored by fundamentalists. Look, you can go ahead and you can choose to believe that there is a higher God, or you can be like, oh, cool, there was a different God in this pantheon of fictional gods, which is probably the more likely of the scenarios. In verse 15, it says, "Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land, for they prostitute themselves to their gods and sacrifice to them. They will invite you, and you will eat their sacrifices." Now, later on, we're going to see that there are women at the entrance to the tabernacle. I'm like, is that just a mimic of these other cultures? The point that you always need to remember and keep in mind as we move forward, and I'm going to look for it too, is that the Hebrews' behavior isn't that different than any other culture. It's that they're sacrificing to Yahweh. You know, that's it. That's the only difference, is Yahweh is their guy, and they're worshiping Yahweh. The sacrifices, they're all doing sacrifices. They're all doing the same thing. Fine. Just don't do it to other gods, Yahweh. You know, they're sacrificing children. Fine. Just sacrifice to Yahweh. We just don't want you sacrificing the other gods. You know, they are prostituting themselves to their gods. Wrong. You have to prostitute yourself to Yahweh. Of course, this isn't going to be something that anyone's going to tell you to do in the book. But when we hear, oh, there's women at the entrance to the tent of meeting, it's just in line with that pattern. So then we get a second 10 commandments, and it's like, do we want these? They kind of snuck up on me there. I was like, what is happening now? These are a whole other set of 10 commandments, which are called the 10 commandments, and most of them are just Jewish traditions. Do we want these? These are different customs that Hebrews of that time were doing. Are we interested in maintaining these ones? And I will tell you, after talking to a lot of Christians about Bible and stuff like that, they seem to think that the only law we are still under is the 10 commandments. Christians are smart. They want to distance themselves from the Mosaic laws. They want to try so hard to get away from the misogyny and the slavery and all that stuff. They just don't want to bother with the mixed fabrics. They don't want to have to deal with that. In that, they're like, the only law that we're still under is the 10 commandments. Well, this is the chapter where you're going to find the 10 commandments called the 10 commandments. You do not see that in chapter 20. And this one involves, do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. Do not offer the blood of a sacrifice to me along with anything containing yeast. That's one of the 10 commandments. You know, I don't think we want the 10 commandments. You might like them. I think they're relatively useless. But chapter 35 is funny because it opens with a reiteration of the Sabbath again, right? Like, how many times, God? Except this time we get the threat along with it. which I think we already have had, maybe in chapter 21 or something like that. But we get now the reiteration of anyone that does any work on that day will be put to death. Later on, we start hearing about a free will offering. It's cool, man, whatever. If you can spare anything. Yeah, you just threatened to kill us over doing work on a Sunday or a Saturday. You think we're going to feel super comfortable about not giving an offering? You know, God's acting all cool and cash. Hey, man, work on a Sunday and I'll kill you. But hey, feel free to bring a free will offering sometime. It's like, when do you want it? When do you what specifically do you want, and when do you want it? You've scared me. It's like a gangster coming. We wouldn't want anything bad to happen around here. You might not want to work on a Sunday, punk. Also, you're gonna need to pay us 1,000 buckaroos per month. Anyway, God is the OG. So then we get chapter 36 to 39. They're boring. They're reiterating what we already know as far as building the tabernacle. It's the exact same stuff. And it's just weird to see how much time is spent on this. Imagine if this much thought was put into, I don't know, the autonomy for women. Like imagine God actually spent some time, was like, okay, what would be the best for all the people? Not just the wealthy men who I'm getting to write this book and read this book. What would be the best case scenario for all of the folks? You know, he's not really putting in that kind of effort. But let me tell you exactly how to make an ephod, a breastpiece, other priestly garments. You know what I mean? It's just like all this stupid pageantry again that doesn't help anyone. But it's because God's so holy. Oh, he's so holy. He needs a lot of gold. He's so holy. But then chapter 40, something happens. We get this reveal for the interior design. And guess what? God loves it. God is obsessed. They nailed it. They did it right. He's like, oh, it's amazing. You know, I still don't know what holy means, though. We've got holy and the most holy. I'm beginning to understand that holy means set apart. So if holy means set apart, then the most holy is set more apart, set most apart, further apart. You know, what does it even mean? What could it possibly mean? And so God has made all of this happen. He has decided how every little piece of the tabernacle is going to be made. Just so, but why? What's the significance? I don't know if somebody thinks they know what the significance is, but ultimately, because God is the ultimate being and everything he chooses is absolutely arbitrary, the only honest answer is just because. That's why. He wants it that way just because. So if we go back to the parenting metaphor, God being a father, he's the worst kind of father, isn't he? Like a parent would want you to go to bed on time so you have a better day tomorrow, right? Then you won't be tired and cranky. Don't eat as much junk food. It's not healthy for you. Brush your teeth so you have healthy teeth. I want you to do things a certain way because if you don't, there are consequences. But with God, it's like, wipe blood on this. Pour oil on that. There's nothing practical about it. It's just like, have slaves, subjugate women. I don't know. Like, will anyone be healthier or better for it? Somebody will say that eventually. As God, I'm not giving you that. I'm not saying subjugate women because that's going to give them rights eventually, as if that's logical or that's going to help you become better people somehow. Like, I'm not giving you that. Apologists are. I'm not giving you that. I'm just saying do it this way just because. It's really a just because with a devastating consequence for the individuals, the people who are living through this. and then subsequent generations, and then new people who follow this religion. Everyone suffers the consequences of this nonsense. They think that women should be treated the way they were treated in the Bible. Okay, not exactly the same way, but we're definitely going to, low key continue the subjugation. Oh, there is going to be a head of the household. It's still in the culture, right? It's sick. It sucks. And it's right there in the book. And there's no good reason for it. It's a just because. It was the culture at the time written by the people. I always do the internal critique thing, but I want to make sure that you guys realize that the internal critique stops and we can see it's just a flawed human idea. And it's not good. We should abandon it. So verse 15 has a sneaky little line in there, which I don't think I noticed at the time, but it will require a equally sneaky apologetic. It says, anoint them just as you anointed their father, so they may serve me as priests. Their anointing will be to a priesthood that will, check this out, continue for all generations to come. Until Jesus, until the temple's destroyed, then we don't think about it anymore. How is the word all from the mouth of God? How are we supposed to take that? What's the apologetic? How do we get out of this? How do we correct what God is clearly saying here? This is actually a huge thing, by the way. If you forget everything you know, and this is fresh eyes, which I've been trying to do, but I've been losing the plot a little bit. This is the first time we get priests and how these priests are going to behave and their tabernacle and their outfits. This is all ordained by God, and they are meant to serve for all generations to come. They will continue for all generations to come. Is that a prophecy? Is that a promise? Or is that a lie? Which one is it? Is it true or not true? Well, it's not true. So it's a lie, obviously. It's just God getting it wrong, right? I'm really curious what the apologetic is. And then in verse 23, they put bread out for God. It's like putting cookies out for Santa. Honestly, it's so silly. Santa doesn't need all those cookies. He also doesn't exist, just like God. Who is cleaning up the bread? You know what I mean? Who's throwing that out? Was it manna? Here's some manna. I know you just sent it to us, but here it's back. Also, someone's got to throw that out before tomorrow, or else it's going to have maggots all over it. It's just like, so dumb. Like, it's so dumb. It's so dumb. So Moses in these previous chapters is doing everything just as God commanded. It listed a number of times, just as God commanded, and Moses did just as God commanded. He's doing just as God commanded because he knows what happens if he doesn't. He knows the Levites will come for him if he doesn't, right? He has seen God's wrath enacted many a time, okay? So he knows the consequences. That is very coercive. You must see that. That doesn't do much for someone's free will. It's like, do it. Yeah, okay, definitely. Because if I don't, X, Y, Z. And this might be why Christians use free will to excuse divine hiddenness. I hadn't thought about that before. Like if you say to a Christian, why does God not show himself? Like, why is he so mysterious and hidden and we don't know that he actually exists? And they'll go, well, if he revealed himself so you knew for certain that he exists, like you wouldn't have that free will anymore because you would be like, uh-oh, God is seriously watching us and I know for sure he's here. So he has to kind of keep us at arm's length. He's got to, just give us a whisper, just give us little hints. So we kind of know he's here, but we have to have that faith so that we can still choose things, which it doesn't really make sense because that's almost like saying your behavior matters or something like that. I don't even really fully, maybe I'm getting the argument wrong, but it is incredible that free will is used to excuse the problem of divine hiddenness and the problem of suffering. Free will is so foundational to a Christian's belief. And it's not even in the Bible. I hope you saw my video about free will recently, but It's so foundational. Try removing free will. Imagine if there wasn't free will. If your faith crumbles when you remove the idea of free will, then free will is your God. You'll remember back in chapter 32, God is angry because they build the golden calf. But the reason why they're building the golden calf, most likely and most logically, is because they're trying to call Yahweh down. They want the golden calf as a conduit for Yahweh. They want to be with him. So they made something out of gold as per their culture to bring Yahweh down to earth because they missed him. And Yahweh got so angry, his anger burned. And then he had them build a tabernacle, which is more or less the same thing as the golden calf. And you can look this up, but the idea of the golden calf is Yahweh coming down and sitting on the golden calf. That's the same reason why they put cherubim on the top of the ark. It's the exact same thing. These are things made out of gold so that the God will come down from on high as a cloud, apparently, and settle into his new room. The tabernacle is the golden calf. The only difference is that God said, don't make graven images out of animals. It's matching the culture, right? It is within their understanding of the human beings who made this stuff up at the time. It's well within that. This is nothing magical or divine. The only difference is they got it slightly wrong with the calf. But please just notice that God's anger in chapter 32 is so irrational because all they were doing there was what he was just about to tell them to do. I mean, for goodness sakes, the same thing happens in Exodus 35 as it does in Exodus 32. They bring their gold. They bring their gold to melt it down to make this stuff. It's 1 for 1, guys. It's 1 for 1. Thank you for watching. The next episode is going to be a recap of all of Exodus. And then we're on to Leviticus. I can't wait. I can't wait to get into Leviticus. I can wait because I know that it's going to start with the burnt offering. But we do have some exciting new things happening when we get into Leviticus, which I will announce when we get into Leviticus. It's not that exciting, to be honest. Don't actually get too excited about it at all. Now I feel like I'm building it up too much. But we'll see what our new color scheme is. Please subscribe if you haven't. Like the video, comment on it, and we will see you next time. Bye.